Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today is my first way too early prediction for the 2026 governor's prediction map. There's going to be about 36 governor seats up for election in 2026. So in this video, I'm going to break down some information about all of them and give you my way too early ratings for them now December 13th, 2024. So I'm going to go mainly using Wikipedia just for this one, just giving a quick race summary of all the races that are up and just going from there. So for the state of Alabama, it is a Republican incumbent governor, Kay Ivey. She is term limited and not eligible to run for re-election. Actually, let me go here, make it a little easier. Yeah, she's not eligible to run for re-election for a third term. There are some potential candidates mentioned, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth and Huntsville Mayor Tom Battle, as well as some others mentioned as potential Republican candidates. That being said, we know the state of Alabama, it's one of the most Republican states in the entire United States. And if you want some proof of that, that's New Hampshire, real quick. Alabama, the presidential level, voted for Donald Trump by about 31 points. And if you want to look back at the 2022 elections, Alabama voted for Kay Ivey by about 37.7 points. So Alabama is certainly going to be a safe Republican governor's race, regardless of who the Republican nominee likely is. So that's Alabama. Now we have the state of Alaska, where Governor Mike Dunleavy was reelected in 2022, but he is now term limited and cannot run again in 2026. Republican State Senator Cliff Bishop has expressed interest in running. Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom is also a potential candidate. This one's a little bit more interesting because of the presidential level. Alaska just voted for Donald Trump by about 14 points, which would, based on my ratings, be a likely Republican state, not a safe Republican state. Back in 2022, though, Dunleavy did win this race by about 26 points. So it really is dependent on who the Democrats put up and who the Republicans put up. If there's a significant challenger on the Democratic side, I could see this race getting competitive, maybe even into the likely column. For now, I'm going to leave Alaska as safe Republican, but I could see that one getting competitive depending on who the candidates are. So now we're going to look at the state of Arizona. This is going to be one of the closest races in the entire country. This is Governor Katie Hobbs. She was elected in 2022, which is 50.3% against Kari Lake. She is eligible to run for re-election, and she's not yet said if she will, but she has begun raising funds in preparation of a potential run. And it also is mentioning that Secretary of State Adrian Fontes on the Democratic side is considering a primary challenge against her. This does not list any Republican candidates, but in clicking on here, we can see Tom Hayton, a gym chain founder, is one potential candidate. Karen Taylor Robson, who I believe ran against Kari Lake in 2022 in the Republican primary, narrowly losing to her, is listed as someone else who has also publicly expressed interest. Some others that are mentioned, Jake Hoffman, Charlie Kirk, Kari Lake, and Kimberly Yee as potential candidates. Obviously, it's way too early to say who will run and who won't, but right now I think Arizona is going to be one of the closest states in the entire country in 2026. And I honestly am considering leaving it right now just as a pure toss-up without giving it to the Republicans or Democrats yet, because I do think it is going to be really, really close. However, in the 2024 election, Donald Trump did just defeat Kamala Harris here, 52% to 47%, a 5% victory, whereas you look back at the governor's race in 2022, Hobbs won here by 0.67%. So this race is incredibly, incredibly close, and I do think if the Republicans nominate someone who, no offense, is not Kari Lake, I think Republicans could probably win this race by about under 1% of the vote. I'm not really comfortable this time putting in anything over that because, yes, Hobbs won a very close election in 2022, but she does have the advantage of being an incumbent, and that's something that I know a lot of challengers, both from their party and the opposite party, take for granted. An incumbency factor is no joke, but I do think a Republican challenger against Katie Hobbs would narrowly win this race by about 1%, maybe a little under. So right now I have Republicans winning 3 seats, Democrats 0, 33 to go. We have the state of Arkansas. This is Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She was elected in 2022. She is running for re-election. Arkansas, one of the most Republican states in the entire country, voted for Donald Trump by 30 points. Her father was governor before her. She will win re-election in a safe margin, no doubt about it. California, this is a very interesting one in that it really is dependent on who the Democratic candidate is. Because Gavin Newsom, governor of California, he is term limited by the California Constitution and cannot seek a re-election. We've already had a bunch of candidates declaring, including State Senate President Tony Atkins, Lieutenant Governor Alani Kounalakis, FFA Secretary Jesse Perez, and the State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond, former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villagrassi, and former Controller Betty Yee have all announced their candidacies. But there is a potential rumor happening here of Kamala Harris, the outgoing vice president and Democratic nominee, potentially running for this race in 2026. If she were to do that, that would obviously be a very big boost for her chances in the governor's race, seeing she has the highest name recognition in this race. It remains to be seen who will run, but based on the state of California and that it was won by Kamala Harris by 20 points back in 2022, Gavin Newsom won by 18.4. It's looking more likely than not California will be once again over 15% margin of victory, making it a safe Democratic win. Now we go to the state of Colorado, where Governor Jared Polis, who was reelected in 2022, will now be term limited by the Colorado Constitution and cannot seek re-election. Some potential candidates are Jason Crow, Colorado's 6th District. He is considering running for the Democratic nomination. Other possible candidates include Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, U.S. Representative Joe Negussi, and U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, former State Senator Ken Salazar. It also was mentioned that a former CEO, Kent 30, was speculated to be considering an independent bid, but he's announced he will not run. Colorado is an interesting one because at the presidential level, Kamala Harris just won the state by 11%. Looking back in 2022, Polis won by 19.3%. I'm borderline here between making this race safe or likely Democrat, but since the incumbent is retiring, there will likely be potentially a better Republican chance of winning than if there is a Democratic incumbent. So I'll say Colorado starts off as likely Democrat, but I could certainly see getting close to Election Day in 2026 and making this a safe Democratic seat, but I'll put it in likely for now. In the state of Connecticut, Governor Ned Lamont was reelected with 56% in 2022. Connecticut does not have congressional governor term limits, so he can run for re-election if he wants. He's not yet confirmed whether or not he will. But Connecticut, the presidential race, voted for Kamala Harris by about 14%, and back in 2022, the governor's race went about 12.9%. So actually pretty consistent with this, and whether it is the incumbent governor or not, I think Connecticut starts off in the likely Democratic column, likely being about an 11 to 12 point win again for the Democrat. That has Republicans at 4, Democrats at 3. As for the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, of course, ran for president in 2024. He is term limited by Florida's constitution and cannot seek re-election. Right now, the top candidates that have been rumored are Florida's Representative Byron Donalds and former Representative and Attorney General nominee Matt Gaetz. These are the leading names on the Republican side. However, other possible names such as Florida Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran, Attorney General Ashley Moody, Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson, and Miami Mayor Francis Suarez are possible Republican contenders. On the Democratic side, Chevron Jones, Florida State Senator, is potential Democratic candidate. Others include Fentrice Driscoll and former Democratic lead Nikki Fried as potential candidates as well. Florida is interesting because in 2024, Donald Trump just won the state of Florida in the presidential election year by about 13%. Back in 2022, however, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis won the state by 19.4%. So this is one that's right on the edge of being safe and being likely. I'm battling to go with safe or likely because Gaetz or Donalds will not have the incumbency advantage that DeSantis does have. I could see if Donalds is the nominee, I could see it being a safe state. If it's Matt Gaetz, I'm a little bit more unsure what the margin will end up being. I'm on the fence between likely and safe. My gut is telling me to leave it likely to begin with, around that 13-14% threshold. I'm going to leave it there, but I'm really close to putting it in safe. But I'll leave Florida and likely Republican for right now. The state of Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp was reelected in 2022. He'll be term limited by Georgia's constitution and cannot seek a third term. Attorney General Christopher M. Carr has announced his campaign for the Republican nomination. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones has also expressed interest in running, while Agriculture Commissioner Tyler Harper, former Senator Kelly Loeffler, and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger are also seen as potential Republican candidates. On the Democratic side, the leading candidate right now is former governor nominee in 2022 and 2018, Stacey Abrams. She is the highest name recognition of all the potential candidates. while also former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, is someone who could also be a potential candidate, along with Jason Carter, grandson of Jimmy Carter. So this is going to be a very interesting race. Georgia, I think, and Arizona are going to be the two closest in the country. And it's really contingent on how Georgia does in 2026 as a whole. I think it's more likely than not that the Senate race and the governor's race both will probably vote the same way. That's something I'm going to put down. I do have the Senate race narrowly flipping to Brian Kemp over Jon Ossoff, and I do have the governor's race narrowly staying Republican as well. I don't think it's going to be a lean Republican win because I do think it's going to be very close, and there won't be Brian Kemp, who has been very, very good in the state of Georgia in terms of getting Republican voters out to vote. I think Georgia stays Republican, but I think it's going to be very, very close. As for the state of Hawaii, Governor Josh Green was elected in 2022. He's eligible to run for re-election, but it's not yet stated if he will. But Hawaii is one of the most Democratic states in the entire country. It voted for Kamala Harris by 61%, 37%. It will be a safe Democratic state. I also just realized I forgot to show the state of Georgia for 2024. Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris by 2 points in Georgia, so it's still a very, very close competitive state. The governor's race back in 2022, Kemp won by 7.5, but Kemp will not be able to run this time. So that is Georgia and Hawaii. Now Idaho, Governor Brad Little was elected but does not have congressional term limits or governor term limits, so he's eligible to run for a third term. He's not yet stated whether or not he will do so. Idaho voted 67-30 for Trump over Harris. Idaho was a 40-point win in 2022. Idaho will likely be, once again, a safe Republican win. There's now 25 governor's races remaining. Republicans have currently won 7. Democrats have won 4. Now we're going to look at the state of Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's up for re-election in 2022. Illinois does not have term limits for governor, so he can run for a third term if he wants, and he's publicly expressed interest in doing so. If he does decide to run against, or not run again, U.S. Ambassador to Japan Rahm Emanuel is a potential Democratic candidate. On the Republican side, Republican governor nominee in 2022, Darren Bailey, is viewed as a potential candidate. Illinois, it was a 11-point win for Kamala Harris in 2024. The governor's race back in 2022 was a 12.5% win. I think just putting it in the middle of that, about a 12-point, 11-point win in Illinois would put Illinois into the likely Democratic margin. Now, after Illinois, we're going to go to Iowa. Governor Kim Reynolds was reelected in 2022 with 58.1%. Iowa does not have term limits, so she can run for a third term if she wants, but she has not yet stated if she will. This is all contingent as well on if Reynolds will run. Assuming she does, she may be facing off against Democratic Minority Leader Jennifer Confirst as a potential Democratic candidate. Iowa just voted for Donald Trump 56% to 43%, a 13% win at the presidential level. Back in 2022, Reynolds won by 18.5%. I think right now I'm pretty confident saying Iowa starts off as a safe Republican governor's race. Now we go to the state of Kansas, where this was likely going to be a Democratic to Republican flip. Governor Laura Kelly was reelected in 2022 with 49.5%. She'll be term limited by Kansas Constitution and cannot seek a third term. However, Lieutenant Governor David Toland is seen as a potential Democratic candidate. U.S. Representative Jake LaTurner was seen as a potential candidate on the Republican side, but has said he will not seek office. But this is going to be an uphill battle for Democrats in the state of Kansas. Even though they did just elect a Democratic governor in 2022, Kansas voted 16 points for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris just in this past November. But it is worth noting in 2022, Kelly was able to win re-election over the Republican candidate Schmidt by about 2.2%. This one is primed to be a Republican flip in 2026, and I do think the Republicans do win it. I don't think it's going to be a massive win, but I'm not sure it's going to be a super tight one either. I think somewhere in the likely to lean column is where I think it's going to go right now. I'm going to put it as likely Republican, but this is certainly one that I think will be a Republican flip, but could become close if the right candidate runs. The state of Maine, Governor Janet Mills was reelected in 2022. Due to Maine's constitution, she cannot run for a third term. There are several candidates being mentioned on the Democratic side, including Representative Jared Golden of Maine's 2nd District, Maine Secretary of State Shanna Bellows, State Senate President Troy Jackson, and former State House Speaker Director Future Hannah Pingree. and also current State House Speaker Rachel Tablet Ross. On the Republican side, there's State Senator Rick Bennett and State Representative Laurel Libby and political analyst Ray Richardson as potential candidates. So for Maine, it just voted statewide for Kamala Harris by about 7 points. That would be a likely Democratic characterization. In 2022, Maine voted 13.2% for Janet Mills over Republican former Governor Paula Page. That would also be about a likely Democratic win. I think until I see otherwise, Maine's going to continue to be a likely Democratic seat. If the Republicans run a very good candidate, it is possible it could get very competitive. And Maine in 2014 did elect a Republican governor, so it has happened before. But I think until I see otherwise right now, it's looking like Maine will likely elect another Democratic governor. As for the state of Maryland, this is Governor Wes Moore. He was elected in 2022. He's eligible to run for re-election and intends to run for a second term. Potential Republican challengers include Jason C. Buckle and Stephen S. Hershey Jr. and former Harford County Executive Barry Glassman. Maryland's one of the most Democratic states in the United States. Just voted for Kamala Harris 63% to 34%. And when Moore won back in 2022, Moore won by 32.4%. I have no doubt in my mind that Wes Moore will win this race in a safe Democratic margin. That was Maryland. Now the state of Massachusetts. Governor Maura Healey was elected in 2022 with 63.7%. Healey is eligible to run for a second term. She's not yet stated if she will do so. The only Republican listed as potential to run is John Deaton, the former cryptocurrency attorney and nominee for Senate in 2024 against Elizabeth Warren. Massachusetts, it voted for Elizabeth Warren, or for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, 62% to 36%. And back in 2022, it voted for Maura Healey by 29.2%. I don't think, there's a hot take on this, I don't think Maura Healey will win by as much this time around if she does run for re-election. But does she lose by enough to get under 15% margin of victory? That one I'm a little bit less confident in. I do think Maura Healey runs for re-election. I do think she wins by over 15%, but I don't think she wins by much more over 15%. Like, I think her victory would probably be about 15 to 16% statewide. It is possible it does dip below that 15% threshold, but I don't think it's going to go too much below that. That's Massachusetts. Now we go to Michigan. Michigan's also going to be a very, very close one, as Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who was reelected in 2022, is term limited and cannot run for a third term. There are potential candidates listed as well, such as former presidential candidate and Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. He and his partner moved to Michigan, I believe a few years ago. That's where his family is from. So he's a potential candidate. Michigan Senate Majority Whip Mallory McMorrow is a potential Democratic candidate as well. Other potential Democratic candidates include Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, Lieutenant Governor Carlin Gilchrist, U.S. Representative for Michigan's 10th Congressional District John James, and Tudor Dixon are seen as Republican candidates. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan announced in December 2024 his intention to run for governor as an independent. This is one that's going to be very fascinating because that Detroit mayor running as an independent is certainly going to shake things up. Where, had it not been, if he's not running and it's going to be Democrat versus Republican, I probably would start Michigan off as somewhere between likely and lean Democratic, probably lean Democratic to start off. Michigan, however, did just vote for Donald Trump 49.7 to 48.3 over Kamala Harris in the presidential race. But back in 2022, the state voted 10.5% for Whitmer over Tudor Dixon. And it's possible Tudor Dixon will be the Republican nominee. Again, I'm not sure if she'll, didn't mean to click that. I'm not sure if she'll be able to improve her numbers from last time. She probably will. But Michigan's going to be very, very interesting. It is going to be 2026. It's supposed to be a Democratic wave midterm year. I'm going to start out with the independent candidate running, putting Michigan in the lean Democratic column, maybe tilt Democratic column, but it's going to be fascinating. I think Michigan starts off as lean Democrat, but this will be certainly a very close one to watch, along with Arizona and Georgia. So that's Michigan. Now Minnesota. This is Governor Tim Walz. Of course, he just served as Kamala Harris's running mate in the 2024 presidential election. He does not have any term limits against him in the Minnesota Constitution, so he can run for a third term. He's not yet stated if he will do so, but he is eligible to do so if he would like. A potential Democratic candidate, if Walz does not run, is Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. As for Minnesota, it was just a 4-point win for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, 4% in the presidential race. when Walz won back in 2022, he did win by 7.7%. So this is going to be a very, very close one. I'm not sure. It's borderline for me between lean and likely, but I think it is possible Walz might win this one by like 4.9%, which would be enough to put it in the lean column, but just barely. I do think Minnesota could be competitive, but I don't think it's going to be like Walz is in jeopardy of losing competitive. I'm putting it just on the borderline between lean and likely. So that has Democrats at 10 governor's races, Republicans at 9 with 17 to go. The state of Nebraska, Governor Jim Pillen, he is eligible to run for re-election, He's not yet stated if he will do so. Nebraska is a very Republican state, 60 to 39 back in the presidential race a little over a month ago, 23-point win back in 2022. Nebraska will be a safe Republican state. The state of Nevada, this is going to be a very fascinating one as well. Governor Joe Lombardo was elected in 2022, defeating Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak. He is eligible to run for re-election. He's not yet stated if he will do so, but I do expect he probably will. State Attorney General Aaron D. Ford is considered a viable Democratic challenger to Lombardo if he chooses to run again. This one's fascinating because Donald Trump just won the state of Nevada. He was the first Republican to win the state, I believe, since either 2000 or 2004. I believe it's 2000, but I think it's 2004. Trump was the first Republican to win here, either way, since the early 2000s at the presidential level. And when Lombardo won back in 2022, he won by about 1.5%. So that would be a lean Republican win. Trump's 4-point win would also be a lean Republican win at the presidential level. I think you can see Lombardo and Trump kind of set the momentum going in the state of Nevada, where Republicans may start doing better statewide and potentially the governor level, Senate level, and congressional level in future elections. I think Lombardo right now starts off as a lean Republican favorite to win re-election. Republicans have 11, Democrats 10, 15 races to go. The state of New Hampshire, Governor-elect Kelly Ayotte just won her race in 2024. New Hampshire does elect its governors in 2-year cycles, but we'll have to wait and see how that one goes. We did just see in 2024, Kamala Harris did win the state of New Hampshire by 3 points over Donald Trump, but I don't have the governor's map pulled up, I don't believe. Actually, I might. This is the presidential race. Does it have the governor's race as well? It does not. Okay, so I don't have that one pulled up, but let me search this really, really quickly. This is real-time election research. Kelly Ayotte did defeat Democrat Joyce Craig 53.6% to 44.3%. That is about a little over a 9-point win, which would be a likely Republican win. And for the sake of 2026, I do think Kelly Ayotte will start off as a likely Republican candidate to win, seeing as she won by 9 points in an election that was supposed to be very close. I think given how Governor Sununu did going from his first term, where he won by about a lean margin to a likely margin, I think Ayotte could win 2026 by a likely margin as well. So that's New Hampshire. Now we're going to look at New Mexico, where Democratic governor was reelected Michelle Lujan Grisham in 2022. She is term limited and cannot run again. Potential Democratic candidates include Senator Martin Heinrich, Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller, and Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales. State Senate Minority Leader Gregory A. Baca is a potential Republican candidate. New Mexico just voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by about 6%. The governor's race back in 2022 was about 6.4%. Both instances were likely Democrat. For right now, New Mexico is potentially a sleeper state to watch for in 2026. Could potentially get close, maybe down into the lean category, but I'm going to start it off as a likely Democrat. 13 races to go now. The state of New York, Kathy Hochul took office in 2021. Her has not been polling too well. She is eligible to run for re-election and suggests she will be, but she is open to a potential Democratic primary challenger, giving her polling. And representative on the Republican side, Mike Lawler, could potentially be challenging her as well. This is a race I just did a video on a few days ago. New York is really close to me between being lean or likely Democratic. Given Kathy Hochul's approval ratings, though, I want to put it as lean Democrat, and I think I might even put it as lean Democrat, but this one's going to be really, really tight. The polling right now, it's certainly a hot take to leave it as lean Democrat, but I am going to put it there for right now. So that's the state of New York. Ohio, Governor Mike DeWine was reelected in 2022. He is term limited, cannot seek a third term. There's lots of candidates on the Republican side, including Lieutenant Governor John Husted, Attorney General Dave Yost, potentially Vivek Ramaswamy, 2024 presidential candidate, as potential candidates. Ohio just voted for Donald Trump by about 11 points at the presidential level. It voted for Governor Mike DeWine by 25 points back in 2022. Seeing as he won't have the incumbency advantage this time around, I think I'm going to start Ohio off as likely Republican, kind of like Florida, right on the edge between being likely and safe. But I'm starting with likely for right now, but certainly could get more and more Republican as the time goes on. Oklahoma Republican Governor Kevin Stitt is going to be term limited by Oklahoma's constitution. Potential Republican candidates include State Auditor Cindy Byard, Attorney General Getner Drummond, State House Speaker Charles McCall, Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell, State Senate President Greg Treat, State Superintendent Public Instruction Ryan Walters. This is going to be a very big race on the Republican side to replace the governor, but Trump won here in 2024 by 34 points. The governor's race was a 13.7% win in 2022. I would be pretty stunned if this race does not end up being a safe Republican win in 2026. 10 governor's races left to go. Republicans have 14, Democrats have 12. In the state of Oregon, Governor Tina Kotek was elected in 2022 with 47%. She's eligible to run for re-election, but has not yet stated if she will do so. Oregon just voted for Kamala Harris by 15%, 56% to 41%. Back in 2022, this is a 3.4% race between Kotek and the Republican Drazen, the independent candidate getting 8.62%. I think this is a race that I think also is very borderline for me between being safe Democrat or likely Democrat, kind of like Ohio and Florida, but on the Democratic side. I am going to have Oregon start off as likely Democrat, but again, the potential to get more blue as the election goes on, I could certainly see that unfolding. Now we have the state of Pennsylvania. This is Governor Josh Shapiro. He was elected with 56.5% in 2022. He's eligible to run for re-election, but has not yet stated if he will do so. Pennsylvania Treasurer Stacey Garrity is a Republican, is a potential nominee. State Senator Doug Mastriano, the 2022 governor nominee, is considering running as well, reportedly. Pennsylvania is a race where Donald Trump just won the state by 50.4% to 48.7%, super close. But at the same time, back in 2022, Josh Shapiro won this race by 14.8%, just 0.2% off of being a safe Democratic win. I think for 2026, I do think Josh Shapiro does win this race, and he actually does win it by potentially over 15%. And it sounds crazy to see a solid blue Pennsylvania, but from everything I've seen, Josh Shapiro's been being polled and approved of very well in Pennsylvania, and I think he likely will win by about 15% statewide, which would put it as a safe Democratic win. 8 governor's races to go, 14-14. Rhode Island, this is Governor Dan McKee. He's eligible to run for re-election if he does. I do not believe he's announced yet if he will. Also, former Governor Gina Raimondo is looking potentially to run for this seat. Rhode Island just voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by 14 points. The governor's race was a 19-point win back in 2022. Rhode Island, again, on the border between being safe and likely. I think it stays safe for right now. Could potentially be likely. As for the state of South Carolina, Henry McMaster, term limited, cannot run. Again, there's lots of potential Republican candidates, including potentially Representative Nancy Mace, who I did a video on that a few days ago. Donald Trump just won the state of South Carolina by 18 points. McMaster won this race by 17.4 back in 2022. I think South Carolina once again goes safe Republican. As for the state of South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem is term limited. She cannot run again. There are several Republican candidates looking to announce potentially run for this race, including potentially U.S. Senator Mike Rounds. But this is one of the most Republican states in the country, a 30-point win for Trump over Kamala Harris, a 26-point win for Kristi Noem back in 2022. South Dakota will go safe Republican. Now we have Tennessee. Governor Bill Lee, he is term limited, cannot run for a third term. But there are U.S. Representative Mark Green, Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs, State House Speaker Cameron Sexton has been named as potential Republican candidates. We did see Tennessee vote for Donald Trump by about 30 points. We did see this governor's race go Republican back in 2022 by 32 points. Fully expect Tennessee will be a safe Republican state. Just 4 governor's races left now. We are going to go to the state of Texas. Governor Greg Abbott is eligible to run for re-election. There's no term limits in Texas, and he has announced his intention to do so. Dave Clark, a former Amazon executive and CEO of Flexport, as a potential Democratic candidate, along with James Tallarico. Donald Trump just won the state of Texas by 14 points, just barely likely borderline between being a safe Republican state. Back in 2022, Greg Abbott won by 10.9%. I think Abbott right now starts off with Texas in the likely column, just barely, like Florida and Ohio, on the edge of being a safe Republican state. Vermont Governor Phil Scott was re-elected in 2024 as a Republican. He's eligible to run for a sixth term if he wants. He's not yet stated whether or not he will do so. This one's actually pretty simple. Kamala Harris won here by about 30 points, but that's the wrong one. Back in 2022, Scott won by 47 points. If Scott runs, this is going to be a safe Republican win. If Scott does not run, this will be a safe Democratic win. So it's contingent on what he does. I'll say for now he runs, it'll be a safe Republican win, but again, that will change depending on if he runs again. The state of Wisconsin, Governor Tony Evers up for re-election. He does not have term limits. Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley and Attorney General Josh Kaul are possible Democratic candidates if he does not run. This is going to be one of the closest races in the entire country. This is a really good prime pickup opportunity for the Republicans, but in a Democratic wave year, I do think the Democrat Tony Evers, if he does run for re-election, narrowly holds on under 1% and holds this race. I mean, I remember back in 2022, I thought the Republican Tim Michels was going to defeat Tony Evers, but Tony Evers had the power of the incumbency. He's a very formidable candidate and governor in these elections, and I think he'll likely hold on again by under 1 point if he does run. It also depends on who the Republicans put up against him. Wisconsin's certainly going to be a very close one to watch. And Wyoming, Governor Mark Gordon was reelected in 2022. He is term limited, so there will be a new candidate. Donald Trump has encouraged Republican State Senator Bo Biteman to run for the position. This is undoubtedly going to be a safe Republican seat. So right now I have Republicans winning about 20 governor's races, Democrats winning about 16, with Republicans flipping back the state of Arizona, the state of Kansas, and I believe that's it, including some very close holds in Nevada and Georgia. This race is certainly subject to change as it's December of 2024, and this isn't until 2026. So Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe New York, and Minnesota are places I'm watching very, very closely. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button. And make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really, really, really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.